Alright guys, welcome back. Today, or should I say tonight, in this beautiful rainy weather, we're gonna work on the bumper. We're gonna get the bumper situation started. And the first thing that I have to do is reroute this AC line. It's not a real big deal on a reroute, but it needs to happen. So we're going to get started on that. Let's go. Alright, this guy's got some weight to it. It's pretty heavy. So the bumper winch tray, it comes with these brackets, these spacers for the sides, and then it comes with the extra bolts, the holes that are on the sides that add additional support for pulling and using this as a winch. Came with those bolts to put in there. So now I'm gonna get this guy up on here, and this might be comical. All right, and there it is. Okay guys, so there's been a bit of changes since the last time I filmed. So I got the bumper on. It's very simple. You just bolt these in here. You use the two bolts and washers provided. You bolt them in there, one on each side. You use these plates. These are just like a spacer plate. It looks like it's a little crooked, and it's just the way it's cut. I could probably have flipped it over. In fact, I probably should have, and maybe I will, but it does hang off the edge like that anyways, no matter which way you hang it, because the drills in it are off-centered. It's an off-centered thing, and I think it's supposed to be like that. It looked like that even in the instructions. Once you get those 10 bolts in, oh, by the way, I replaced that bolt. I went down to the local hardware store. I found a bolt that was the same diameter. It's fixed and bolted on there. This guy was kind of a pain, just for the simple fact that it came with this book that I thought was the instruction manual. This is the only instructions that are in the entire guide, and it's the electrical instructions, which are super simple. I mean, I'm glad they told me how to do it anyways, but it's literally, the power cable is already connected. You literally unscrew this nut, you put the negative on, you screw it back on, that's it. And then you run your cable to your battery. Everything else is in warnings and winch operations, but there's absolutely no instructions on how to mount it onto this. They give you a bag of bolts and the winch, and good luck. Luckily, it's very simple, but it did take removing this thing, putting it back in, removing it, putting it back in, because I got it in, I got it all lined up. I went to put the bolts in, I realized that there's nothing for it to screw in, and then the one bolt that I had just grabbed out of the bag to put it in, I didn't realize the square nut fell off of it, and so I had to pull this out, put the square nuts in, and then they kept falling out, so I had to put some Gorilla Tape over the holes for the square nuts to put them in that the Gorilla Tape just left on there, and then finally lined it up correctly, got underneath it, went to drill it in, realized that my frame, and I don't know if you can really see that, but my frame in there, this bar went down, all the way down, and this back plate for the spool was catching on it, and I couldn't push it back far enough to screw the holes in. So I just took a pair of snips, snipped this metal, this little sheet metal down at the bottom. I just snipped it and folded it out of the way. This went in just like that. It's in solid, everything lined up, everything bolted in great. It seriously took 6 or 7 minutes to install the winch, and probably 5 minutes to install the bumper. On the back, I just added this heat-resistant wire loom. I just thought it looked better because now I know exactly which cable is the positive and which cable is the negative all the way around, but I wanted something just to kind of protect these wires even more. So I just kind of, threaded it through. I went through this hole here for this line that's originally here with this padding. I just went next to it and zip tied it in. It's all in, everything's solid. My AC line is solid and clear. Everything's clear. Nothing's gonna rub or anything. Where this is touching the metal, it's on the folded inside, so it's on the soft side of the metal, so it won't cut in through it or anything. I rerouted this AC line, which this bracket was down here. I completely destroyed it when I took it off and mounted it there on the 9/32 hole I drilled in the top of this bracket. And then I wrapped it around with a zip tie just to hold it down. I also did one that goes underneath the bracket. Then I put this line here, and then I got to that point, and via the instructions it says once you get the bumper to here, to stop with the bumper install and to switch over and install your winch next. So yeah, we're good to go. So the next thing I'm going to do is hook the battery up and check to make sure that it works, and then move on to, I'm going to just put the back tires back on the FJ just to get it on the ground, and then I'm going to fire it up and make sure my 130 amp alternator works. So let's check that out. I purchased a yellow top battery. They're pretty pricey, but I figured buy once, cry once. We have done a lot of work, and quite a bit of it off camera. All right, so let's walk you through what I've done, get you up to speed to where I'm at right now. Okay, to run my pod lights, what I did was I had the pod lights mounted. I ran it through with some wire loom. I hardwired the pod light wires to my wiring harness using these. These are like crimper shrink wrap tubes. Apparently they've got a bit of solder inside of them as well. I zip tied all the wires once I had it all in the wire loom. I kind of kept them all routed the same way. I zip tied them to this middle brace behind the winch, but away from the radiator. And then just kind of kept them together. Just I didn't want anything wobbling around or wiggling around. I zip tied it to this bracket. And then behind the light, there's that hole that this the AC line runs into. I just borrowed that hole and ran my cables all into that. Inside the engine bay from behind the headlight, I ran the cables in, and I just kept them zip tied up against the wall just so they wouldn't move and be out of the way of the battery, because the wiring harness that I got for the pod lights had a pretty long cable, so that's why it's kind of spooled in there. Ran it around, connected it to the battery. On the positive, I've got the fuse right here that I can access in case I blow the fuse. This is the fuse for the pod lights. Runs from the battery and it goes up to the relay that was already included in the wiring harness kit that I purchased. It's a Nylights, it's the cheap Amazon $16 to $20 wiring harness kit. Hooks up to this relay, and then the cable on the back of the relay splits off, and that's this one right here. I'm gonna run this cable. I already had it ran through here, but I had to rerun my cables. But I cut that boot, and then you just push that cable in the end. And once this button is wired up inside, push the button, it lights up, and the pod lights come on. All right, guys, unfortunately, this is where I have to stop the video for the install, and I'm just gonna have to go to post-install. My wife was having surgery. She's actually in surgery right now. I needed to get this build done before yesterday, and I was out here at 9:30 last night turning a wrench trying to get this vehicle completed so I could drive it today. I needed to get this done, so I had to unfortunately put down the camera and pick up the wrench and just bust through it. So far, the things that I've completed is I completed the 3-inch lift, the bumper, completed the winch, spark plugs and coils, battery, and alternator. All right, so let's go take a look. I replaced my struts and my springs. You can see my new strut right there. You can see the new spring there. It was quite simple. First thing I did is I jacked the vehicle up on jack stands pretty high up, right here at this angle on this frame. Tube frame here. Once I had the vehicle lifted, I placed some support underneath the pumpkin here. I put my floor jack there and I jacked it up just to kind of hold it in place. And then I started disconnecting my upper and lower control arms. This
this bar right here. I only disconnected the brake lines that went from the rear axle here up to the chassis itself. I didn't disconnect any of these other brake lines, and I didn't see any pulling or getting any tightening or anything. I did remove both wheels just so they would be out of the way. It's just a little less weight too. And then yeah, just lowered it down far enough to remove the springs. It was very simple. Whenever you do a lift install on an FJ Cruiser, if you're going over 2 inches, I've been told it's recommended that you get these diff drops. And especially if you're not going to change out your CV axles to a high angle CV axle or a heavy duty. They're about 20 bucks. It does create about an inch more space for rocks to hit, so you have to be careful. You do lose clearance. However, I'm saving my CV joints and my CV axles until I can get upgraded ones. Okay everyone, so I've got a little bit of a break. I'm actually on my lunch break. One of the joys of working from home. I've got a little time. I'm gonna go ahead and tackle something that's been going on for a while. I thought that the lift was gonna fix the rubbing, but it didn't. So I'm gonna fix it. I'm gonna do a body mount chop on it real quick. I've already got the wheel loosened. I just haven't pulled it off yet. Okay, so I removed the wheel and I got my jack stand under there just for safety. I've also got my jack currently holding it up as well, just to make sure. And now I'm going to remove this mud flap. It's there's a screw there, and there's 2 screws there, and then there's one underneath, and that'll come right off. So there's a bit more hardware than I thought. There's actually 5 screws that have these 10mm heads, and then there's also this push pin. And the way it goes is there's a screw here, and then up underneath in this, there's 2 screws and the push pin. And then around on the back, sorry, that guy right there. You take those 6 things out, and then you take this plastic mold off, and you get down to the frame. Now, as you can see, I started a cut when I first got the vehicle. Probably did this about 3 months after I owned it. I just wanted to help somehow, and I didn't really know how to do the body mount chop. I hadn't watched any videos on it. I just kind of read about it, and so I just trimmed some of it back. I didn't take off very much. I needed to take more off. I was just kind of scared. Well, I've watched some videos and read a lot more on it, and so now that's what we're going to do today. We're going to chop off about from here all the way across back here, and we're just going to kind of remove this chunk out without touching the body mount itself. So let's get started. All right, and there we go. It took some chopping, especially getting down into this area where it's just so close together. It was kind of hard to get in there. Yeah, it's kind of a hacky job, but this is the first time I've ever done it. So I just basically cut a good chunk of it out. As you can see, it used to stick way out here, and now that's all gone. It's in pieces on the ground. That's it. So now I hit it with some Rust-Oleum. I'm gonna let that dry and then get the mud flat back on. All right, and there you go. No more rubbing. I mean, I've got this little bit of rubber right here that's kind of rubbing. I think I'm just gonna cut it off. But yeah, no more metal touching the wheels. In fact, I've got a couple inches in here now, probably 1.5 inches. So good, fixed. Onward to the next thing. All right, guys, and it finally arrived. My roof rack mount kit. However, when you only have a week to get a big job done, like an entire suspension upgrade, and you work a full-time job, and you have a full-time family, your garage becomes trashed. So the next step is to clean that mess. Ugh. Much better. All right, so I should be getting a call to go pick up my wife any minute now. We've got a clean garage. It's clean enough. I mean, I've got so much stuff that needs to go out into this shed that's getting built that, I mean, there's just clutter, but
this is what I got. So the next thing we're gonna do is the roof rack so we can put the rooftop tent on. And I'm so excited because after that, then we get to go camping proper. All right, I'll talk to you guys next time.